Folks, welcome into a new episode of the Crowdus' podcast presented by Trainwreck Sports, our first show of the offseason. So thank you so much for tuning in. It means the world to us, and by us, I mean myself, everyone at Trainwreck, of course, and especially my partner in crime, Kevin Masseri. Kevin, it's been a while since we've gotten to do a show on here together. How's the offseason treating you so far?
You know, it is what it is right now. Just getting back in the swing of things with everything going on, and just doing what I can to stay up to date and bring great content, have great guests. I mean, that's the most important part. That's what we live off of. People want to see the guests. They don't want to see my mug. So it's great to have all types of different people. Like, our last AFC Championship game, we had a lot of great names on the show.
That was the best we've ever done, I swear.
Yeah. And it's great to have, different guests, and excited for it. I'm really excited to get going. Lots of great content and material. I know Ryan's ready, so
absolutely.
Yeah, Ryan Talbot, New York Upstate. His Twitter handle's right there, so make sure you give him a follow. It's an easy one to see there. Ryan, thank you so much for kicking the offseason off with us. Hope you haven't been watching too much Sabres lately.
I've been watching too much Sabres. That is the problem, but thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, no problem. And, tonight we'll be going through some of the big picture things like JJ Watch, Matt Milano, testing free agency, potential signings and cuts. And speaking of cuts, our good friends at Manscaped, nice segue, I know, are revolutionizing the world of men's grooming to guarantee you never experience a cut or nick while shaving ever again. Their Lawnmower 3.0 even has a headlight on it. I know how dim some of those college apartment bathrooms can be. Believe me, you need a razor with a headlight on it, all right? Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. They obsess over their technological developments to provide you the best tools for the best grooming experience. Manscaped is trusted by over 2 million men around the globe. So join the movement. Go to Manscaped to all your below the waist grooming needs. Man, I almost got through it without messing up. Just go to manscaped.com, use promo code Trainwreck, get 20% off and free shipping. You'll be reminded by it by the ticker at the bottom of the screen the entire episode. Manscaped.com, promo code Trainwreck. Now, obviously, the big news that came out today is that Matt Milano, in fact, is going to test free agency. We kind of already knew that he would, but, now it's a certain thing. He's going to go out, find his value, see if maybe someone's willing to pay him that $13.8 million a year that Spotrac projects him to. Obviously, the big knock on him has been his injuries because, he hasn't played a full season since his rookie year. And, his importance, it's well documented for being with the Bills. 12-1 with them, 3-3 without him. So, Ryan, I'm guessing you're not shocked by the fact that he's going out into free agency, right?
No, not at all. Brandon Beane at the end of the season, he at his press conference said, we'd love to have him back, but he's earned the right to test the market. And that's exactly what he said last year with Shaq Lawson, with Jordan Phillips, pretty much knowing full well that he was going to let them see what was out there, make an offer maybe to one or both of them. I know he had an offer out to Shaq Lawson. I'm not so sure if they made an offer to Jordan Phillips or not. So I'm sure the Bills have a offer in mind. Maybe it's already out there, and they're going to say, go out there, test the market, see what's there. And if someone's going to give you that $13-14 million on average, by all means, good luck to you. We wish you well. But Buffalo is going to have a set price in mind because it's not going to be too long from now that Tremaine Edmonds is going to get paid. Yep. Significantly younger than Milano. That's something to keep in mind. So you have to be smart about how you allocate your money when you already have Trey White, for instance. So I think a rookie at cornerback makes sense this year at some point. You're already paying Deion Dawkins, so maybe you get a right tackle in the draft early this year. That's just how it works in this league. You can't be giving big money to two linebackers on a defense, especially one that struggled against tight ends and struggled at times last season.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty it's such a challenging debate for me with this. I've gotten myself into some interesting linebacker discussions, including being very critical of Tremaine Edmonds at times, especially earlier on in his career. It's tough that we use the excuse of the shoulder and other injuries earlier this year. He was missing plays, he was missing gaps. I guess he's tentative. But you have a large contingent of Bills fans that would much rather sign Matt Milano long term. It's an interesting debate, top to bottom. I cannot see paying him $14 million. I just can't see it. I don't think they have the cap space. I think they already have to do one of these deals with Josh Allen. They've already been alluding to that, and we'll see. I know you can get strategic and use the same cap space that you used this year on Josh Allen and next year and still bridge your way into that large portion of the deal in a couple of years. We'll see how all that plays out. It's not as easy and straight up as that, so you're going to need some money doing that. And I mean, you've seen debates of Micah Hyde needing a deal. I mean, there are a lot of players that will need something coming up. So you can't just give $14 million to your second linebacker, especially if you're deeming Tremaine Edmonds to be the main guy. You just can't do it. No one can afford that. And I know people are willing to go cheap at cornerback too. That's been a debate. Are you willing to draft a player there to supplement Trey White? Are you willing to bring back a wily veteran or do something cheap? I don't see them being able to go out and spend on a cornerback too. So can you save some money there? You're going to sacrifice on the offensive line. But to Ryan's point earlier, they've made the same statements that they did last year with their defensive free agents. It's not boding well. They're very keen on getting extensions done early, like a Deion Dawkins. They're pretty, if they're in the same ballpark, it gets done. That's kind of how I feel like it. Matt Milano's like, you know what? Loved my time in Buffalo. Maybe there's something there for us, as we approach free agency. But, we're going to try to go 13, 14, high years per deal, and get as many years as possible on that. And I quite frankly think the Bills need to address their offensive line. I think that they need to get stronger at cornerback too. And there's a lot of things there for the team that still needs to get done. And I don't know that you can go with Milano, even though the team's first loss with Milano was in the AFC Championship game. So lots to think about. I just don't think they have the luxury, even with the cap rising. It's still going up, right? I mean, there's still reports of, Ryan, do you know, is it at 80, 188? Where are they ending with this?
Yeah, I don't know for sure. It's interesting because probably almost a month ago, whoever the union rep is for the New York Giants, the player rep, he did say something about 188, and that piqued my interest. And then now we know the floor is 180. I wouldn't be shocked if we approach 185, 186. I'm not sure if it reaches that full 188. Still, though, any extra millions here would benefit the Bills and a lot of these other teams that are trying to kind of break even before they can make any moves and then start cutting players to get under that cap threshold, because there's a lot of cut candidates on this team, which we can obviously get into if need be. But it's going to be interesting. I think that you're probably going to settle around 185 when all is said and done.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, 185. And I mean, teams are extremely over the cap. I mean, that's a really interesting note. I think the Browns, kind of segue to the Browns a little bit. They're over here saying we have all this money, we can do whatever we want. But I think that teams are in good shape. I mean, the Bills can do a lot of different things: restructuring the offensive line, restructuring defensive line, not signing Milano, and being in a shape to where they can go out and make a couple splash free agents. And I think that's a great question. Can Milano play center by Crossing Swords pod? A Morse debate for a different day, I guess. On what to do with his money.
I think they mean hockey center. I think they mean hockey. Oh,
okay. Fair enough. Now making the link to the Sabres.
To be honest.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's even more fair. The Morse debate's a stronger debate. I'm a Mitch Morse fan. I think, Cover One does great work showing that, he is really good at his position.
Yeah.
The whole concussion thing was interesting and sitting out, even though he was active on game day. And were they really sitting him for that concussion? Mm-hmm. I have a challenge believing that, guys, that he was really sat for the concussion. Usually you're cleared. The protocol's deeming you not eligible or not really in a position to reoccur that concussion, or you wouldn't be cleared. That's what they're looking out for, CTE and other things during the protocol. I think they straight up wanted to see the head of Mike Butker and others along the offensive line. But Matt Milano is such an interesting debate. At the end of the day, Ryan, do you sign him? If he comes to you and says, I got this offer from the Giants for $13 million over 5 years, do you re-sign him, or are you in the camp of you just can't do it?
You just can't do it. I think the only way the Bills sign him is if he hits the market and he finds that there's no big money offers out there. Maybe a team's offering 12, maybe a team's offering 11.5, and he can come back to Buffalo on a 1-year, $10 million deal, something like that. And Buffalo says, listen, here's what we can do for you. we got to see what the cap's going to be next year, and then maybe we can work from there. That's the only way I see him coming back, is on a 1-year deal, because what he's looking for just simply isn't there. Now, do I think he could get 12, 13, 14 million out there? I do. There's some teams that have a lot of cap space that are in really good shape right now, that need to fill some holes, that need to try to get to be, a little bit more competitive out there. So it just takes one team to love you, just like we learned last year with Jordan Phillips, Shaq Lawson, getting 10 million on average each, where I don't think either player necessarily was in that price range, in my opinion. So all it takes is one team. So if a team like Jacksonville, I'm just throwing them out there, just because I know they have a lot of cap space, likes a certain player, they can throw a lot of money at that player, because they're going to have a Trevor Lawrence on a rookie deal. They don't have to worry about that for a period of time. So this is where they could go out and spend on key free agents at different areas while Trevor Lawrence is on that rookie contract.
Yeah, no, I mean, those are all really good points.
Yeah, and speaking of cuts, like someone who just became available 2 hours before we started here, I saw you tweeted about it, Ryan. It's Christian Kirksey from Green Bay, who obviously, if you remember, the Bills were super interested in bringing in last year. It seemed like it was Green Bay and Green Bay and Buffalo, kind of the final two teams there. His cap situation for Green Bay wasn't huge. It was 7.6 million or so for this year, and they got away with like 2 million dead cap, I think, after the cut. I mean, it's not like he had a bad year or anything. I just think that was a cap-stricken team who needed to get someone off the books. Are you interested? I think Kirksey is a very, very good discount Matt Milano right now.
He's a discount Matt Milano in the fact, though, that he's also had some trouble staying on the field as well. He played 11 games this year. So if you are bringing him in, you're going to let him compete for some playing time, compete for a role, but you don't want to depend on the guy to be a key starter for this team. I think that the Bills should kick the tires. They obviously brought him in for a visit last year. They liked him enough. I know the Raiders were interested as well. I don't know if he ever went on a visit there, or if they were truly a finalist, but I know the Packers and the Bills definitely had offers out there for him. So I wouldn't be shocked if Buffalo went back to it and said, hey, we need some linebacker depth, because maybe a Tyrell Dodson can fill that role, but going into year 3, we haven't seen a lot of snaps from the guy. There's been some injuries there too. We have AJ Klein, who's getting up there, but when he saw more playing time over the course of the year, he did get better out there. And then obviously there's some draft options. So the Bills can go a lot of different routes, and maybe this is the year they also go big nickel or Buffalo nickel. We heard nothing but the fact that they wanted Kyle Duggar last year. Obviously, they never had a chance to even draft him. So there are some prospects that kind of fit that mold, that safety linebacker hybrid, which, Milano kind of was when he came out. He was that a safety in college, obviously, and he can transition to that linebacker position over the course of his career. So, maybe Buffalo is looking for something in that role too. So I think there's a lot of options on the table. But if Kirksey's price tag is right and the team feels like that is a pressing need, yeah, you can get it done now. It won't go into the comp pick formula, and it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's good points there all around, and I think you brought up someone I struggled with early on, and that's AJ Klein. PFF ranks them right next to each other in ranking. 61st linebacker is Christian Kirksey, 66 is AJ Klein. They did sign him to a fairly significant deal, one bigger than I would have liked to seen. So I think there's a natural transition there in a rookie. As much as I may or may not like that personally, I think that might be what the team's thinking. And you mentioned Dodson and others. That might be the natural transition for some little bit of depth. And I think that's the way that the team rolls. And trying to replace him just like they did, late in, day 3, middle of day 3 with Matt Milano. So I think that they're going to probably follow a similar, and the Buffalo nickel, as you mentioned. I was never for it. I think I tweeted the day of no Buffalo nickel. I just didn't see the room for him with as much as they like to play normal nickel with, Taron Johnson. We'll see what they do at the cornerback position. That's a big question, but how interested were they in it last year? I don't know. One of the guys that was rumored was available in Chin and went later and ended up being a really good player and really being one of the better players on a bad roster. So it's tough for me to say I was right or wrong by it. I didn't like Duggar all year. Doing, he dug in a little bit better later in the season, so we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, I mean, Morse debate for a different.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on there for us. And I'm a big fan of getting no big nickel, really deepening the cornerback room, Ryan. Yeah. And I think it's a natural transition to the cornerback room. How do you feel about that? I mean, that's something I really wanted to ask you and get your opinion on, because people are all over the board, from loving Levi Wallace to thinking he shouldn't step on the field, to being huge Josh Norman fans, to thinking Josh Norman isn't, the player he even close to was. I've heard people wanting to get a nickel. It's a really weird unit for the Bills, and one that you could ask someone, they say it's really strong, and you would ask someone else that says it's the worst unit on the team. So where do you fall? The whole big nickel linebacker, it's an interesting debate based on personnel. Where do you fall on what they need to do at cornerback too?
Well, at cornerback, I would not be one of the people saying that they're really strong. Obviously, Trey White is a very good cornerback, number one, but I have questions after that. Taron Johnson, as good as he was down the stretch out of the slot, he had a very rough start to the year. There are just as many people calling for Taron Johnson to get benched as there were for A.J. Klein at the linebacker position. Mm-hmm. He had some woes where, okay, he was struggling in coverage. Well, he's known for his tackling. Beginning of the year, he was missing a lot of tackles. As the year went on, he got better and better. He made some key plays in the regular season, obviously the pick 6 against Pittsburgh, playoffs, pick 6 against Baltimore. So he settled in over time. But at one point, Cam Lewis was given the nod. Was it the Tennessee game? Am I remember that? Or was it the Chiefs? Was that or the Chiefs? Yeah, one of those two games. He was hurt early on, and then that opportunity never kind of presented itself again. So the Bills did look that way. So I think they still have questions there. Cornerback 2, you can get by with Levi Wallace. But is that the best that you want to do? Because he is limited athletically. There are certain routes that he struggles to cover. He struggles to close the gap on. He can make plays at times, but he is not an ideal number 2. He's a guy that I would love coming off the bench if there was an injury or something like that. Dane Jackson, I was a big fan of him over the what we saw, but that's such a limited snapshot of what he can do. You can't go into next year and say, this guy is our cornerback number 2. He could earn the job in the offseason, don't get me wrong, but there's not enough there. The one thing I'll say about this regime is every single year they've brought in a veteran to compete for a roster spot. Yep. You know, good old Vontae Davis. You can look at EJ Gaines. You can look at Kevin Johnson, Josh Norman. The list goes on and on and on here. So could they go back to the veteran market? I think there's going to be a lot of veterans that get cut in these next few weeks just because of the way their cap hits are. There's going to be a few that might say, hey, I'll sign a 1-year deal to play in Buffalo, to play opposite Trey White, to play for a Super Bowl ring. Someone on my timeline mentioned AJ Bouye yesterday. I don't know if...
Yeah, I saw that too, yeah.
And I don't know if he's the answer, don't get me wrong, but he has experience playing with John Butler, who's the Buffalo's defensive back coach from their time at Houston together. He was there. They were there together for 3 years. So there's some familiarity there, I guess is the word I'm looking for. But in this year's draft class too, you could attack the position. I mentioned, and I hope I do a good job saying his last name, but Ife Melifonwu out of Syracuse.
I was going to ask about him, and I was going to say the same thing. So yeah, so Bills met with him at the Senior Bowl, right?
Yeah, they had a really good meeting with him, and you know, I know I've caught some flack for my tweet saying they might have to target him at 30. The only reason I said that is because there's a few mock drafts where I've seen him going round 1, early round 2, pretty much just so we can understand what I was saying. I'm not sure he would be there when the Bills get on the clock in round 2. They would either have to trade up in round 2 to get him, or maybe trade down in round 1 if they're not comfortable with him at 30. But there was an NFL mock draft from Chad Ruder that had him going 29th overall. Checks a lot of the boxes, has really good size in addition to the speed, in addition to being a good fit in this zone defense. So there's a lot of routes that the Bills can go, but no, I'm definitely not sold on this cornerback room in any way, shape, or form after Trey White.
Is there a corner you like veteran-wise on the market? I know you mentioned Bouye, but is there one? I think Xavier Rhodes is a guy they could target, or you think he's going to get big money? Where would you be at if you brought in one of those veteran guys?
Well, you know, Rhodes is an intriguing name. Obviously, he has that relationship with Stephon Diggs. He has a relationship where he could maybe be talked into that. I'm interested to see what his market actually looks like, because based on his last few seasons in Minnesota, I was not impressed. I thought he had a nice bounce back year, though, in Indy. I thought he played pretty well there. So I'd have to see the market. So there's no real specific veteran that I'm looking at just yet. But as over the next few weeks, like I said, I think there's going to be a lot of interesting cornerbacks that hit free agency. and there might be one or two that could end up being a solid fit for this defense.
And speaking of interesting possible fits for the defense that are hitting the market from cuts, Trey Boston from Carolina got cut yesterday. And I saw just, one tweet of, the safety class in this year's free agency is almost as strong as the wide receiver class. Not as much like star power, but in terms of just pure depth, like very, very strong. Obviously, it's not a position of need. It's arguably our best position on the entire football team with Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. But, is Trey Boston someone you would want to add? Is there another name there that you would want to see? They also, there was like a linebacker safety from, I think, LSU that I think the Bills met with recently, right?
Yep. And I'm blanking on his name. I want to say Grant, but I'm not sure if that's right. But
I just know there was one. I don't know.
There was one, but no free agent at safety that would appeal to me. And Trey Boston specifically, I think he's going to still look for a starting opportunity somewhere in this league, where you're not getting that in Buffalo with Poyer and Hyde. I think that they really do like Jaquan Johnson. I think that you could see him get integrated a little bit more here into the system coming up this season. So they're happy with that. I wouldn't be shocked if a Dean Marlowe came back if they couldn't find a safety in the draft, or maybe, somewhere in those middle late rounds is not a guy that they don't like, that they want to bring in for competition. They seem to be very comfortable with that. And like Kevin said earlier, Micah Hyde might be in line for an extension here. I think they really want to keep him in the fold for the foreseeable future. He's still playing at a high level. He's key to that defense communication aspect. So I don't know if going out with limited resources as is, it would be a good time to go out and attack the safety market right now with so many other needs elsewhere.
Yeah, those are good points. Was it Jabril Cox from LSU?
Cox is just the linebacker. No, I want to say it was I know exactly what he's talking about.
Stevens. That's
Jacoby Stevens. Yeah, okay. Yep. Yeah, I mean,
here's in one of my Google sheets, and I just had to figure it out.
Melthon Wu.
It's B68. B68 is the cell.
Okay, B68. Shout out to B. Shout out to all the Excel nerds out there. B68 on that. But yeah, Melthon Wu is a great name, and everybody's favorite, rising up the draft board in Florida State, the combo safety. I think we're going to see him rise as high as probably in 30. So there's a couple of names out there in players that you could target for this kind of position, and we'll see how much they love it. I still think that it's not going to be a position they target. So we'll have to see if they continue on the big nickel thing or a third safety, or we'll see what happens. But I'm a bigger fan of them continuing to dress the offensive side of the ball to make a dynamite style. I think they need to get that offensive line figured out, because look at what happened in Tampa and how good that Brady was there. And I think they're going to try to follow suit and make sure that offensive line is tip top, and it struggled against Kansas City. So I think that's going to be the number one thing that they target. And I think the running back talk is real. Mm-hmm. I have sources out of Buffalo about how serious they are in Jarrett Patterson. And it's been reported that they've met with him, and he's very vocal on it. I think the Bills are legitimately looking at a second round running back. And I think that they're looking to go as high, for them, it's a late second, remember? So I think that they're sitting there saying, if the right guy's on the board in the end of the second round, we're going to address running back. But we're sticking on the defensive side of the ball right now. I think there's plenty of things that they can do to get the defensive line right. Think how much money and assets they spend on that every single season. It needs to be in better shape, except Jerry Hughes every single year. It's got to be better than it's been. And I mean, it leads us to, really thinking about JJ Watt and the availability and potential of JJ as we're on JJ Watch and all the different things that have been happening coming out of him being interested in the Bills, probably in the final three, if that's fair to say. See how much interest actually that he has in Pittsburgh with that uncertainty at quarterback there. Green Bay is an interesting option for him. In Cleveland, I mean, there's really not a ton of other fits that would fit exactly what he's looking for. And Buffalo might start to creep toward the top of that, as long as they come with a deal that money-wise makes sense for him. So defensive line's a position they need to get right. They have to stop. I mean, first pick last year, what was a second rounder in AJ Epinesa. They need more from him, and they need him to be a contributor next year at his cap level and everything else. They need to stop, Vernon Butler. You have Mario Addison. You have Quentin Jefferson. He spent a lot of money in that and had limited production, in my opinion, Ryan. Do you agree? Do you agree that they need to get better with the assets that they're spending at the defensive line position? And even Harrison Phillips, I know he was technically they traded those second-round picks away, and he was the next defensive player off the board for them. So, they're spending money, time, effort, energy, especially one of the first moves they did with Star Lotulelei coming back this season. And maybe we learned our lesson on dogging him a little bit too. So where's your opinion on, if anything's been weird for Beane, it's that defensive line position that he seems to need to struggle to find the right fit between rookie and veteran.
Yeah, that's a very underwhelming position from last year, in my opinion. Now, I will say AJ Epinesa, they asked him to lose a lot of weight. They asked him to change quite a few things about his game. So they're going to ask him to rely on his speed a little bit more than he obviously ever had to at Iowa. So that's going to take a little bit of time. But that kind of takes me to J.J. Watt, because who did he say he wanted to emulate his game after? It's J.J. Watt. So if you can get Watt in here for 1 or 2 years, give Epinesa part of that rotation, obviously. You want him playing, but have him sit under that learning tree, so to speak, learn from one of the best to ever do it. And I think that could also help develop his game. But Buffalo overspent on their defensive line last year, and the results were not there. I think they spent a little bit more money. I don't know if they were bidding against themselves there for Mario Addison, but Addison had production leading up to last year, about 9 sacks on average over however many years, 4 years, something like that. But I want to say this was his worst year since I think 2013 in terms of sacks and quarterback hits. They just weren't there. I don't want to make excuses for these players, but I will say there was no offseason. There was no time to gel with Eric Washington, who obviously Addison knows very well. Vernon Butler knows very well. But it is a little bit different when you're bringing a whole new unit together. But I think Mario Addison's gone. I think it's a one-and-done situation. He's going to get cut. I think Vernon Butler was extremely underwhelming. I think that he's a one and done and will be cut. You could make the case for Quentin Jefferson as well, but if you get rid of 3 guys, those are some holes you have to start filling too. And you're going to be going to maybe some rookies in those spots, maybe some very low free agents. And that doesn't mean that those players can't fit, because they found some diamonds in the rough when they claimed Jordan Phillips, for instance, from Miami. He filled in on that defensive line extremely well and earned a few small contracts with Buffalo before he hit it big in Arizona. But it's a risky game. At the same time, they spent all that money and the results weren't there. So if you can get a J.J. Watt, I wouldn't want to go over $12 million for J.J. Watt at his age, at what we've seen. I know he took on a lot of double teams last year and his pass rush win rate was still very high. But this is also kind of like a Mario Addison situation. He's on the wrong side of 30. He's going to start slowing down, even if it's not this upcoming year. It might be the next year. There's younger guys in this free agent class. There's Carl Lawson, who I have in this piece that I'm working on right now. Going to be 26 years old, had 5.5 sacks this past season, but he had 32 quarterback hits. Really high up there. And then there's Romeo Aquara, who's kind of on the other end of the spectrum, where he had 10 sacks last year, but I think he only had about 17 quarterback hits. So made the most of those hits for the most part, when they were resulting in sacks. So there's younger guys, and both of them have price tags that are lower than Watt's average salary. Aquara was about 10, where I want to say Lawson was about 8 million. So if you can bring in someone and save money and get younger and get production, I'm okay with that too. If the Bills do end up losing out on J.J. Watt, I don't think it's the end of the world. That being said, Kevin had a good point. I don't know how many teams are going to be left standing when this is all said and done. Pittsburgh has already pretty much looked like they're starting to move away from Ben Roethlisberger. And I'm not saying that Ben Roethlisberger would have been the reason that he would have signed there, but
it's the name. It's the name.
It's the name, but it's also, can I win a Super Bowl with Mason Rudolph? I don't think so. Yeah. So it'd be nice to play with the brothers, but maybe I'll wait until my final contract. Maybe I can get a 1-year deal after this upcoming deal wherever I land, and I can play with my brothers, and it'll be a really nice feel-good story. It was a beat reporter, so it's nothing official, but a beat reporter out of Green Bay pretty much said tonight within the last hour, it's not going to happen in Green Bay. These moves that you've seen, it's just because of their cap situation. They're trying to get enough cap space, one, to address some of their own needs, re-sign some of their own players, have money for their draft class, and then occupy some of these other spots that they need to address, and they don't have that big kind of money. I'm sure Watt would love to return to Wisconsin. He played his college ball there. It might be a dream come true. And of the quarterback situations, no quarterback outside of Tom Brady is probably more proven than Aaron Rodgers. So if you're looking to win a ring in the next 2 to 3 year window,
where else are you going to go?
Right. Rodgers, at least, he's going to get you to the dance. He's going to get you close to it. And then maybe, he can help you get that rest of the way there. Watt, that is. And then Cleveland has more money that they can play with right now. That's not even before they can cut some players and things like that. Having Myles Garrett on the other side would be appealing. But I have questions about Baker Mayfield still. I'm not sold on him. He's not in the same class as a Josh Allen. He's a guy you can win with. But can you get to the Super Bowl with him? I'm not sure yet. I know that they were a few plays away from knocking off the Chiefs with Chad Henne this year.
Still couldn't get it done.
They couldn't get it done. And when the game was late and it was a 4th and long, don't get me wrong, they decided to punt and said, hey, we'll trust our defense to get off the field and we'll get better field position. When you're at that point of the game, you need to trust your quarterback, trust your skills, offensive skill set, players that you can move the chains, and they didn't in that situation. So I don't even know if they're a great fit for him. When all is said and done, Buffalo checks all the boxes. And obviously, he might have questions. Can Josh Allen replicate those numbers again? It's a fair question because he made such a significant jump from year 2 to year 3. But I think he can be a 65% completion percentage type of guy, throwing for 4,000 yards, still being a guy that can run with the ball. So it's a quarterback that will be in the MVP conversation more times than not for the foreseeable future.
So that whittles it down to the Bills and the Browns, right? Based on what you just broke down there, would you say that's it? Is that his decision as of February 19th?
Unless that beat reporter out of Green Bay, because sure. I had Green Bay as the favorite. Yeah. I just thought, it checked a lot of the boxes. But if they don't have the money, then I think it does come down to the Browns and the Bills. And who would have thought we'd be saying that, 5 years ago? Yeah, Watt's going to be looking seriously at the Browns and the Bills. People would think we were nuts. But they are on the rise, both teams. Like I said, I still have questions about Cleveland. They were the 3rd best team in their division. They did win 11 games, don't get me wrong. But they also played the NFC East this past season, so those were kind of some gimme games on that schedule. They did lose to the Jets when they were battling COVID. They beat Jacksonville by 2 points. They went to overtime once with Cincinnati, and that was not the Joe Burrow game. That was with the backup playing, Finley. And then they needed a late game touchdown in that first Bengals game to beat Cincinnati. So don't get me. Good teams find ways to win. They won 11 games. I just wouldn't be shocked if they took a step back here in 2021 when they placed some tougher competition.
And remember the Browns. They couldn't get by they couldn't buy the Ravens. They couldn't buy the Steelers. A couple of the winning teams that they just the Bills took care of. If we're going to make the comparison, they were not able to do the same. So they struggled in those scenarios against against the Ravens. Even when Lamar Jackson's trotting back onto the field with whatever he had going on that day.
It was the shit.
Yeah, we'll call it that. But he was still struggling that day. He was bad that day, as bad as Lamar Jackson was really until the divisional playoff game. Yeah. Prior to that, he had. He was really starting to come on, and that was really his coming out party again. So I'm still Lamar Jackson. I'm still good. He came in and just tossed a dime to Marquise Hollywood Brown in that game. And the moral of the story there is, how legitimate are the Browns? I mean, that's a fair question. I think any Bills fan in the world should have been rooting for the Browns in that game with Chad Henne on the field. And let's be honest, that the concussion was never going to keep him out. The neck stinger, the whatever it was for Mahomes, and even playing on a half of a foot. He still was able to be effective against the Bills. So everyone should have been rooting for the Browns. That's just not, to me, they overachieved, and I don't think they were the 3rd best team in the AFC. I just don't think there is any way that was true. I think they're a playoff team.
It's the Colts. The Colts were the 3rd best team in the AFC.
I think that the Colts, after it's all said and done, the Bills had to play them in the first round in a 2v7 game. But I do think that you could have an argument based on the playoffs that they were the 3rd best team, playing really hot football, really good football. Philip Rivers looked great. You could make the argument they were the 3rd best team in the AFC as it was wrapping up, and the Steelers faltered, the Ravens faltered, the Titans faltered. So that's an interesting debate. But at the end of the day, Ryan, let's wrap it up for this. Where do you think Watt signs? Just your prediction, all things in. His options are running out. So is he going Buffalo? Is he going Cleveland? Or do you have a wild card like, man, I don't even know who, San Francisco or something. Like who do you think?
I'm going to go with Green Bay until all is said and done. You know,
I knew I was going to need the strength. I got up for a reason.
I just wouldn't be shocked if they find the money, or JJ Watt maybe settles for a little bit less anticipated, a chance to return home, a chance to really play for a Super Bowl ring with Aaron Rodgers. There's a lot of storylines there, but if the Packers are truly out of it in terms of they don't have the finances, then I'm going to go with the Bills. So I do have the Bills as, I guess I'll say, my 1B. Okay. But I think Green Bay is my 1A right now.
So if they are out for legitimate reasons of money, you would have the Bills. Yeah. So you would think the Bills would be JJ's being like, all right, now I think it's Buffalo.
Correct. Yep. Okay. I just think that they check all the boxes. Culture fit. I could see him having a conversation day one with Sean McDermott, like right now, I guess, during the recruiting process, and getting off the phone and be like, man, I want to play for this guy. Say what you want about Leslie Frazier, but that's a guy that played at a high level in his career in the NFL. He's a guy that has a lot of experience. I think JJ Watt would love to play for someone like that. And Brandon Beane, too. You talk with Brandon Beane once, and I think you get pretty fired up, too, and want to run through a brick wall. I wouldn't be shocked if they can they talk him into it. I just think that they're a really good fit for one another on and off the field.
Fair enough.
Mm-hmm. So Buffalo's going to be here.
What contract does he get?
I'll say a 2-year deal, $25 million, and maybe they average it out so that he gets most of the hit in year 2. Not, maybe it's 10 this year, 15 next. So that way, when the cap's going up, they have more money that they can use on him, and they can kind of keep that number low this year.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. And that's probably, Beane is I tweeted at someone earlier, Beane is an Olympic cap gymnast. Like he can do some crazy things. I don't know if anyone has a better understanding of how to maneuver a salary cap. Definitely no one in New Orleans. We can say that for sure. But we spent 36 minutes on the defense. So we'll go over to the offense. And there's been a debate on Twitter, like, is it the offensive line? Is it the running backs? Like, I'm of the opinion that it's kind of, it's not a one fixed thing. It's not like you fix the offensive line and then, Devin Singletary and Zach Moss are going to run wild. They'll do better, but it's part of the fault's on them too. They were missing, Devin Singletary wasn't as elusive as he used to be. We shouldn't rely on him to break tackles in the backfield all the time, but rookie year Devin Singletary probably would have done a little bit better. He just looked more efficient. Where do you stand on if there's a debate there at all? Like, I think it's both. And, does that impact what they do in round 1? Because the sexy picks are Najee Harris and Travis Etienne. But, the not so sexy ones that make the run game possibly better are like, the Liam Eichenbergs.
Yeah, I lean that it's a mix of both. The offensive line struggled in terms of run blocking. This offensive line was tremendous in terms of pass blocking, and I think that the Bills will take that 10 out of 10 times when you have Josh Allen as your quarterback. Mm-hmm. But they also need to figure out how to get better up front. That will open up things for the running game, but you kind of said it. Devin Singletary was more tentative as a runner this year. He did not hit the hole. He did not hit the gaps when he was supposed to. He was overthinking things, and maybe that does come when you're getting hit in the backfield or you're having to break a play in the backfield and then end up with like a 3-yard gain. Maybe that took a toll on him. Zach Moss didn't live up to expectations. He had a case of turf toe at one point this year that kept him out for a while. He didn't necessarily look great, but as the year went on, it looked like they were kind of transitioning to him as their lead back more than Singletary in terms of his usage and how they used him, minus that San Francisco game where they benched him after that fumble out of the end zone. So it's an interesting point, but I'm not a fan of the running back in round 1 unless you're getting a playmaker, someone that you can utilize in multiple ways, a Swiss Army knife of sorts. Mm-hmm. Because if you're going to go into 2021, your offense really should look pretty similar to what it was last year in terms of we're going to throw the ball a lot because that worked. We have Stephon Diggs, we have Cole Beasley, we have Gabriel Davis. We can bring in some options to replace John Brown because I think John Brown's as good as gone.
I was going to wait until you were done. I was going to say you left out John Brown.
Yeah, I think he's as good as gone. That's another almost $8 million in cap savings that you can have there. So it's just tough. I still think you're going to be passing the ball out. Now, ETN, can he be used in the passing game? Absolutely. He could be an asset there. So if he was the pick at 30, I would get it. I don't like making this comparison, but you almost need, if you're going to take a running back early, you almost need like a CJ Spiller type. And I know a lot of fans that might make you cringe, but if you can remember how good CJ Spiller was, I want to say 2012.
Yeah.
He was a dynamite player. He was someone that could be utilized in a lot of different ways. That's what you need. I am not of the belief that running back is the smartest choice there. I do like the offensive tackle. Liam Eichenberg was my first pick in my first mock draft in round 1. I actually traded back when I was able to get him. Just because, again, Deion Dawkins is getting big money.
Yeah.
If you can get an Eichenberg who is day one, it doesn't have to be Eichenberg. I'm just using him as the example. If you can get a day one starter at right tackle and have him under that rookie contract while you're paying Dawkins big money, I love that idea. He's also really good again blocking, run blocking, pass protection. The reason I actually went with Eichenberg is they took really good with an unorthodox quarterback behind him, a guy that would scramble and take off. And Ian, but well, that's Josh Allen sometimes. Josh Allen's is unorthodox at times where he'll roll one way, he'll move around. Eichenberg can keep those plays alive, and he's also good as a run blocker. So if you can get your line better, and here's my issue with the offensive line. I'm working on this big piece right now in terms of what I would do if I was Brandon Beane.
Nice.
One point I was going to cut Mitch Morse. And I said, well, that's a lot of dead cap, and you'd have to make him a post-June 1st designation. So is it even worth it at that point? So now I'm restructuring his deal. So I think he comes back as center. Feliciano has pretty much already come out and said, I don't see myself playing anywhere other than Buffalo.
Yeah, he's signing.
So I think he's signing. I think that he's a guy that will leave some money on the table to return. He really likes it here. He's still going to get paid some decent money, just probably not at what the estimates currently have him at on Spot Track there. Which is,
you're right.
Yeah, a little bit high to my liking. If that's what he's looking for, I would kind of let him walk in that area. But Cody Ford's going to come back, and I'm not saying they're handing him a job, but Brandon Beane pretty much said, hey, listen, guys, he's been injured these 2 years. We think he's done some good things when he's been out there. We anticipate him being a part of this line, and he's not going to be playing tackle. I think they moved him inside to guard.
On the left side between Dawkins and Morse, right? Because that's where he was definitely the best.
That's where I would at least like to see him play. And then you can obviously have Feliciano at the other spot. You could even have Feliciano obviously as your emergency backup at center if Mitch Morse has another concussion. You still Butker can be brought back as a restricted free agent, I think, on a pretty reasonable deal. So they're going to still have that depth. I'm not sure that there's a lot of pieces that they can go out and get in free agency to address that line. I'd get a veteran to play swing tackle just because Nsekhe is going to most likely, I'm not saying he's going to be gone for sure, but I don't think, I think he's a free agent. So he won't necessarily be back for sure. Darrell Williams, I think, is going to get paid a lot of money out there. I would love to see him back, but I think that he goes, and then you draft that replacement in the draft while having a veteran who can maybe fill that role if the rookie has some struggles early on.
Fair enough. Right tackle is a huge topic of discussion. I think you had the rust 4 spots pretty much nailed to the T. I mean, the wild card in it all, you mentioned Ike Butker. I think he's a guy they love. I'd say this on the show all the time, that they waived him originally as an undrafted free agent and were very upset the Chiefs claimed him. The first thing the Chiefs had to do was some roster gymnastics a couple of weeks later, and the Bills just immediately claimed him back and never let him go since. And he's got a guy that's developed. He is an example of a player that has developed at his position and has shown that being patient worked. And he is a very good spot starter. He is a good third guard. He is someone that if something happened to, like we saw Ford, or something happens to Feliciano, he's a guy that can start and lose limited ability there. So he's a guy they're going to absolutely bring back at the RFA. It just depends on what level. Are they going to trust the first level of undrafted free agent protection and only have the protection to match his deal and not have anything else? Or are they going to tender him up to the second level, and maybe have to pay him $3 million a year? They have to make a decision there on what level they're going to tender him at, because that second level guarantees you him. No one's going to pay a second round pick for him. He's yours, but you're going to have to pay him like 3.4, whatever it's going to be this year, as compared to like that 2.1 level. So what are they going to do with Butker? That's an interesting, or they're going to feel confident that no one's going to pay him more than 2.1. And if they do, they might match anyway. So, we'll see what happens on that front. But he's someone to watch and will absolutely receive a tender, but which level will he come in at? And be really the third guard on the roster. So there's a lot of good options for the Bills. And I think that the 4 is pretty set and is pretty solid. They need to make sure they nailed right tackle though. And I don't think it can be Darrell Williams. I do not think it can be Darrell Williams. I don't think they can afford him. So what do? Do they now jump back to the draft and hope to get someone in the second round? It's possible. What do they do at that spot?
Yeah. I'm sorry. I think first or second round is where you target it. Like I said, Eichenberg in round one would be there, I think, in my opinion, or be close to that. There's some really interesting options in round two that can be had there. And it's interesting because I really like some of these centers that are going to be in the draft this year, but I don't think the Bills can necessarily go there unless one of them falls. Creed Humphrey's not going to fall too far, but he would be an interesting guy. He's kind of the opposite though of Morris, where he's kind of like the steamroller. There's that Quinn Meaners who really made a name for himself at the Senior Bowl, a small school product. Wisconsin Whitewater, same school as Kumaro came out of. He's an intriguing guy too. So there's options. If someone hits those mid rounds, I wouldn't even be shocked if the Bills brought in some more depth there, because that's one thing Brandon Beane has done year in, year out, is added talent, depth, competition across the board. He always signs like 2 or 3, it feels like, free agents too, really late in the process that have starting experience. So he really does keep that line in flux where they have a lot of options as they get closer to the season.
Yeah.
That's kind of why I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kevin.
No, I was going to just say those are great points. And I do think they come up. They just like we might need to do at cornerback too. I think the Bills will need to come up with a way to keep that offensive line price down and have to utilize. I think the second round's the spot for that. If it's not running back, I think that's the spot that they'll target it, because there are some good names that could be there in the 60s. Even if he's not shy about moving up in the second round if he's got to jump into the 50s and do some stuff there. So let's watch out for all of that. In the second round. But yeah, I mean, someone's got to get picked in the first round, and will it be running back?
I don't know if someone has to though. Like, that's why I'm part team trade down, because like the offensive line,
the New England, not pick.
You become your enemies one day, I guess. Like, it's just the offensive line class is so deep right now, and Creed Humphrey is a guy, like, I do like him a lot. He is a center that can also play guard, so he is versatile, and that's one thing that McDermott and Beane both preach, is that position versatility. And I just feel like if you trade down, like, pick 30 isn't going to net you a ton, but again, in a cap-stricken year where we might see effects of it again next offseason. We really have no idea. Like, these picks could be more valuable than we're used to, even though obviously the prospecting process is completely different. Like, there's no in-person interviews and everything. So maybe on the converse of that,
I'm less picks because of that. I'm teaming less picks.
Yeah. So who knows? But that's why, like, in theory, I like being team trade down, just because, like, in the second round, there's just so many more options for offensive line.
Yeah, makes sense. And I don't know how many quarterbacks will last until the end of round one, but it's kind of like one of those situations, the Lamar Jackson situation. Baltimore waited. They moved around the board. They drafted some players ahead of them, and then they moved back into round one to grab their quarterback a few years ago. Is there a quarterback that's on the board that another team covets? Well, then Buffalo is the perfect place to call, because they're obviously not taking a quarterback anytime soon. Buffalo would love to move down, acquire some extra picks, some that they lost in the Diggs deal, obviously. Get a 4th-round pick back that they lost would be great if you get a 2 and a 4, something like that. Dylan Radunes is a second round. I don't know if I'm saying his last. There's so many guys' names I need to learn, because the Bills went so much later into the year this year than I'm used to, which is a good problem to have. That there's all these prospects where I'm like, oh boy, I need to watch some tape on how they pronounce these guys' names. North Dakota State offensive tackle. He's projected as a round 2 pick. He could be there. So there's options, and it's the same thing. They could get cornerbacks. They could do a lot there to address long-term needs, fill them with guys that they think could be day one starters, or at worst starters by mid-season. If you can go with a Levi Wallace, go with a Dane Jackson until that time, or a veteran that you sign in free agency, and then kind of turn the job over as they're more comfortable with the playbook and you've seen enough out of them. So it's a good problem to have in terms of, maybe you can hit on some of these guys and you can find starters opposite these guys that you're paying a lot of money, because the Bills are actually in a pretty good spot at 30 where another team might want to come in, because you get that 5th-year option on whoever you draft, obviously, in round 1. And that can be valuable if you're targeting a quarterback or certain other positions.
And a back of the round the big note too, a back of the round 5th-year
Right.
option, which isn't like it is in the top of the draft. So
exactly.
that's why I don't want to move the pick unless you're talking good value. I don't want to go to 43 and grab pick 104 with it. At some point, that 5th-year option has a value. Get your guy. I need to have big value. So if that means me moving further than early 40s, late 30s, maybe I'm interested in that if that comes in the form of 2 second-round picks or something. But I am certainly not moving away to grab a 4th. Once again, it's more scouting you need to do. There's less roster spots on this roster. You do need the cap help. You do need that. But another 4th-round pick cap help? I mean, not really when the team's more interested in getting skill players like Stephon Diggs with all those 4th-round picks. So
yeah. But like I'm starting to realize the biggest luxury of having what we believe is a franchise quarterback is not having your 1st-round pick be something that you need every single year. Like every year we can think, oh, the Bills can trade down now because they don't need to rely on drafting a quarterback round 1 because we need a quarterback of the future. Like you think about, wide receivers want to come here, running backs want to come here, people want to play with him, but like it just affects so many other parts.
There's more margin of error. I mean, quite frankly.
Oh my, yeah, absolutely.
And that makes you better because you can take more risks. You can make more decisions. You can say at the end of the day, I don't need to be perfect at running back. I don't need to be perfect at receiver 2. I don't need to be perfect at right guard. I don't need to be perfect at linebacker 2. It's decisions you can make now that you weren't able to make because you needed to be perfect on the CJ Spiller pick, on the Sammy Watkins trade up, on a multitude of different scenarios that you might not had to have been. You might have taken Khalil Mack or something in a scenario where you had Josh Allen on your roster and you are able to better the rest of the team and take another chance to add that skilled pass rusher. They make the Mac pick then with, you can do this a million times. He would be the player this team's missing on defense. So, it's those chances that you can make, and you can go all the way. To me, I could see the team even trading up if there's a guy that they really think could really change their roster. I'm not counting that out, that they're like, that's a pass rusher we didn't expect to be there at 15.
Or
we're taking it.
In the teens too. Yeah.
There you go. There's a lot of cornerback 2 right there at that price to match with Trey White. We got to come up and they'll trade whatever it takes to do that. Beane's not scared. And we can't ever discount the fact of trading a 1st or a 2nd for a player with a good contract that'll come in immediately and help this roster. Ryan, is that something we've talked a lot about trading down? I mean, I've seen that pretty frequently right now as we're into February. But do you think that there's a player that could interest the Bills to trade either the 1st or their 2nd like they have? Or do you think that that's run its course just as a one-time deal with Diggs?
Well, I don't think it's run its course at all necessarily. I don't know if it would happen this year or not, like we've seen with Diggs. But, Brandon Beane's aggressive. We know this. Whether you're talking prospects in the draft, whether you're talking players that may be available. I don't see any players that'll be available that you'd want to trade the 1-4 this year. But in the draft itself, if edge rusher number 2 is still there at pick 20, then maybe you do start fielding some phone calls or making some phone calls and say, hey, listen, what do you want for that pick? Because that's a missing piece that we need, because Jerry Hughes is getting up there in age. Even if we sign J.J. Watt, he's getting up there in age. We have A.J. Epineza. We like what we saw from him, but we still need someone opposite him in the future going forward. So, it could be something like that. It could be a linebacker. I've seen, Nick Bolton has been a popular selection in some mock drafts. Sometimes he makes 30, sometimes he's there in the 20s. I'm not saying that he's necessarily going to be a great fit for Buffalo itself, but that's another name I've seen around. So, nothing would surprise me with Brandon Beane. He was aggressive the year that they went out and they moved up to get Josh Allen. They made a trade before the draft, a trade on draft night. Then shortly thereafter, they made a trade to move up to get Tremaine Edmonds. So Brandon Beane is always working the phones. He's always working the lines. I think that he's definitely open to moving up or down on this draft board in this year's draft.
Watch tight end. It's a position we haven't talked about much, but they mentioned, I mean, you don't hear Beane come out much and say we need more production out of that unit. And that's what he straight up said. And he said that about receiver last year. I'd watch that really closely if there's a tight end available via trade or via early in this draft. And you mentioned one already in Pitts. If something happens there, I think that Brandon Beane could be sitting there like, we want one of the first 2 tight ends, and it might be pick 20, and it might be time to make that move up because we didn't do anything at it in free agency. The team's after a tight end. I mean, quite frankly, we'll see how and what form it comes in, but the team is after a tight end after they saw what Travis Kelce did, basically single-handedly to pick apart his defense. It's hard to say that
in the NFL have great tight ends. Like that's how it is. Like even Rob Gronkowski and Cameron Brate, like they're not one great tight end, but they both are capable of making those plays that you need. Like Gronk caught 2 touchdowns, and he's just as old as Travis Kelce, but he looks so much older, you know. Like is Jonnu Smith a guy? Like I mean, that's been kind of like the sexy pick for everyone. The Bills to sign a tight end. Maybe Dan Arnold might be a cheaper option out of Arizona. He had some really nice plays out there, some big play potential, kind of similar to Dawson Knox, I guess. Do you have a player at tight end that you like the Bills to get in free agency, or is that more of a see what comes to you kind of thing?
Well, first with Pitts, we would have to all start some really terrible rumors about him to even fall into a range where I think Brandon Beane can move up to get him.
You never know.
He would be. I know, but I would not be shocked if he was a top 5 pick in this year's draft. And I'd have to look and see. That's how talented I think he is. I guess I have to look and see at those 5 teams if they have a true need there or not. But I think he's long gone in the first half of the draft. But, you know, if he did somehow slide, then he would be an ideal target. You know, you already mentioned some names. I don't necessarily like the price tag attached to Jonnu Smith right now. And again, that's all subjective. We don't know for sure if that's what he's going to end up going for. These are just estimates of what they think at Spotrac these players will be getting. But I think it's a little bit too much money for the production that we've seen so far. I like him as a player. I think you get just as much out of Gerald Everett and pay a little bit less money.
Yeah,
I love the Dan Arnold. I've mentioned him a few times on a few different radio spots. I think he's even cheaper than both of those two, where he had more yards per catch, and he still wasn't a featured part of that offense. But he made some key plays in that Bills game, if I remember correctly, too. Yeah. A few catches here and there. So I think he could be an asset. I don't see them trading for Zach Ertz, but, you know, you mentioned the trade market. There's a guy that the Eagles are looking to move. Could come really cheap. You know, I know that this player probably wouldn't excite fans anymore, but I think it's a matter of time before Kyle Rudolph hits the market. He's already said twice, I'm not taking a pay cut. I think I'm worth every penny. They've had me blocking all this past season, but I know I can do a lot more than that. And I think he can. I think he had 7 touchdowns the year before last, where he was still a part of that pass catching rotation. Now, is he an explosive tight end? No, he's not anymore at this point. But he's still someone that Dawson Knox could learn from. He's still someone that you could run the 12 personnel with. He's still someone that, even though he doesn't like to block, he's gotten a lot better at it because they wanted to see what Irv Smith could do at tight end. So he could be more of an all-around tight end that you can bring in. And the number one person that I think would be cheerleading for him would be Stephon Diggs. Absolutely. Diggs loved playing with Rudolph. And he would be the first to go to Brandon Beane and say, hey, listen, here's a guy that if you want to improve our tight end room, that you want Dawson Knox to learn from how to do things, he's your guy. He can be a contributor in the passing game these next 2-3 years and really help Dawson Knox get it, come together, put all those physical traits that he has into being a productive tight end.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I only like Ertz because he haven't had a 1-year, $8 million deal. It's not long-term. It's no risk. He is the veteran you're looking for in the room. Picks, you know, they're essentially looking at cutting him. So you're talking about probably a day 3 pick. I don't know. I think that could be a natural fit for the team. And I think the second fit is Kyle Rudolph. I think that's the for sure fit for this roster. But all the things he can do, his affiliation with Stephon Diggs, his blocking ability, they love his veteran presence in the room. It's just a matter of, you know, what is Minnesota looking to get for him? They can't imagine that they're thinking they're going to get much, especially needing to offshore that deal and then, you know, trying to free up cap space that way. But he's another one that would, you know, leave behind dead cap for the team. And essentially you'd have him on a 3-year deal left at about $25 million. So you'd be paying him a little over $8 a year. So it's that same range as Ertz. So at the end of the day, you want a little bit more investment in Rudolph. Both aren't going to cost much. But I do think tight end is addressed, and maybe even addressed beside the J.J. Watt scenario that's going on right now. If they do not win that, even if they do, I do think tight end is the number one place they go out and say, we don't have time to develop, you know, Pitts aside, we don't have time to go out and develop a tight end. We just don't. We have Knox. We don't have that time. This team's good now. Tight end takes forever to develop. We need a tight end, and right now Rudolph or Ertz are the only players to do so. That's where I stand on the position group. And I do think that they could get aggressive in saying 1 year, $8 million for him all day. You know, he adds a lot to this room. So I think that, you know, while we're watching Watt right now, the Bills will have a hard cap. on it. And if he's not, interested, kind of like they did Greg Olsen last year, and don't forget that they were in on Greg Olsen. So I do think they'll be a little more aggressive this year and basically say, we want a tight end. And I wouldn't be shocked to see a move come at tight end behind the scenes before it does elsewhere.
Yeah, I think the only position group we haven't talked about yet is wide receiver. So maybe you're just round the show out there. I know another sexy pick that everyone's talking about is Curtis Samuel for the Bills to take in free agency this year. But the wide receiver class is loaded, and I know Chase Edmonds in a wide receiver. Oh, every year, but Chase Edmonds running back, obviously. But he said that he's been talking to some guys that are all saying we're ready to take 1 year cheap deals because we know what's happening this year. We know we're not all going to get paid like we want to. One of those guys, I'm not saying the Bills are going to sign Allen Robinson. He's probably going to get the biggest contract out of this. But you're going to get a guy who can make plays and be possibly a number 2 wide receiver on an all-time cheap deal. Is there anyone out there in free agency, Ryan, that you like for the Bills to add? Or is this maybe one of those, let's it's another good wide receiver class. Let's take a couple dart throws there, day 2, day 3, and see if one of them falls in our lap like Gabe Davis.
Yeah, I haven't sat there and looked at some potential 1 year contract guys that could come at really good rates. I did see that tweet. It would be nice if you could get a premier guy. I wouldn't be shocked though if they just rolled the dice on some speed. And I know John Ross is, that name doesn't bring much excitement, but he has speed for days. He would not be a regular starter on this team. He would be their number 4 behind Diggs, behind Beasley, behind Gabriel Davis. He would just be brought in certain situations. You could always bring back Kenny Stills, someone you had on your practice squad, not as fast as Ross, but still a speed guy. You have to remember that you already have 3 guys that are going to be here in Diggs, in Cole Beasley, and in Gabriel Davis. There's Isaiah Hodgins that I think they want to give a legit shot to be that wide receiver number 6. So you have probably 2 spots that you need to fill. And I'm not even addressing kick returner, punt returner with Andre Roberts because he could come back again and kind of take that 7th spot. But I think in a realistic world, they'd like to have 6 spots. So 1 free agent could be added to the mix, 1 player in the draft. And in my first mock draft, Amari Rodgers is there in day 3. He's kind of like that playmaker. You could take that Isaiah McKenzie role on offense. While I know he can definitely handle the punt returns, it would be interesting to see if he could do the kick returns too. He had a little bit less experience there. So you could also, kill 2 birds with 1 stone there in the draft and get a playmaker on day 3 that can hopefully be an asset in many different ways. And they're looking. They're always looking in the draft. They're looking in free agency. If someone's sitting on the market longer than they anticipated, maybe they do throw a contract offer to a player that you wouldn't necessarily expect. And again, I don't even know what he's looking for in free agency, but you just mentioned some players looking for a 1 year deal. Maybe there is a guy like not necessarily a T.Y. Hilton. I just know he's like, I'm just using him as an example. You could bring in a veteran that would say, okay, I want to have a little bit more of a prominent role than your John Ross, than your Kenny Stills would have. But at the same time, I'm here to win. And I've been in this league a long time. I could come in and I could get a fair rate for 1 season, try to chase that ring, and then go somewhere else where my market's going to be bigger. And again, Hilton might not be a great example. I just kind of threw his name out there as a player that's been in this league for a while, where I think that they might settle this year for a 1 year deal and try to get 1 final contract the following year.
Yeah. To wrap it all up, there's so many names this year at receiver in free agency and the draft. They cannot all get 10 plus. It's just not going to happen. No You're talking about Allen Robinson, T.Y. Hilton, Sammy Watkins, Marvin Jones, Brashad Perryman for whatever he is, Corey Davis, Will Fuller. You're talking about Curtis Samuel. You're talking about Juju Smith-Schuster, Nelson Aguilar. You're talking about Chris Godwin, Kenny Galladay. There's names galore, and half of them, the other half, are going to take 1 for 6. It just is what it is. And I think the Bills could be in on a lot of whoever it is. Maybe it's Galladay coming off of his injury. Maybe it's Chris Godwin's not going to get the contract he's looking for. Rashad Higgins had a good year. He could be in that mix of the 1 for 5. Juju Smith-Schuster, whatever he is, Curtis Samuel. There's names, and they can't all get paid. It's just not possible with the way the cap sits and the amount of overage there is right now. I think one of those names is going to particularly stick out to the Bills at one point and say, you know what, that could be our receiver too. We really like what Corey Davis does, and he doesn't seem to be getting offers right now. Let's go out and make that happen. We really like what Curtis Samuel can do with his speed. Let's go out and make that happen with his jack of all trades type of position. 1 for 8, sure, because he can do a lot of different things. But I do think that that's going to be available for the team, especially really saving the Brown money, and they're going to be able to go out and really replace him dollar for dollar. And there's some good names out there. They're going to be able to. Brian Daboll is going to be able to pick the receiver he wants to supplement Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley and Gabe Davis, and he's going to be able to hand pick that style of receiver it is. And Bills fans have been clamoring, for that big receiver. Maybe it's a Corey Davis. We watched him single-handedly play really good against the Bills. What do you think, Ryan? Do you think that's the way that ends up going out for the 1 for 6?
Yeah, it's funny. Corey Davis was the name when you were just reading off that list that kind of stuck out to me a little bit as being a guy that I think could have trouble landing a big deal because Allen Robinson, he's going to cash in somewhere. I think he's too talented.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even be shocked if he returned to Jacksonville. I know that's where he started his career, but play with Trevor Lawrence. They have the cap space, big money there. You might be looking, I don't even know. He might even still have a home out there for all I know from early in his career. So there's some situations there. There's certain players that are still going to get money. I would not bring a Sammy Watkins back in this picture. The guy can't stay healthy, as talented as he is.
So there's that.
yeah, he's definitely a different kind of guy for sure. But yeah, I think Corey Davis though fits the mold of a guy that's going to fly under the radar. Someone that's not going to get maybe that huge deal, and maybe you could sign him for 1 year. To a 1 year contract where he could come in and be an immediate contributor. There wouldn't be that much pressure on him. There wasn't as much there in Tennessee once they ended up adding AJ Brown, but there, at one point he was a top 10 pick. There were a lot of high expectations for the guy. He didn't live up to that, but as the years went on, I thought this season he really flashed at times. He played some good games, like you mentioned, one against the Bills. I think he could be a comfortable fit here in this offense where he doesn't have to be the guy, but he can be a guy.
He's a great football player. I watched him, covered him in the MAC, and he's able to do a lot of different things. He would bring a nice dynamic difference to this roster if they paired him with McKenzie and kind of wrapped up that room, called it a day. And I think that they're going to have the ability to do so. So it's an interesting debate at what the Bills are going to do here because they love hurt players. They love that rehab room. They love the ability with Tyler Crofts, the Trent Murphys. They love signing guys that were hurt, coming rehabbing here, getting the most out of them. Watch out for the Godwins and the Galladays of the world. I do think they could be fits coming off of injury-prone years. And if one's sitting out there longer because of those injuries and lack of production, that's going to be the time for the Bills to come in and say, you know what, Kenny Galladay, we're going to give you 1 for 8 or 2 for 16 or something that makes sense because you could be a dynamic receiver too for us. So we don't know which way that's going to go and who's hurt more than others and what tape's out there and who's really, Chris Godwin could be the most sought after guy in a couple of weeks. Or maybe he's not. But I think then that's when the Bills can come in and swoop in because Allen Robinson's getting all this money and Will Fuller and others. Someone's not, and the Bills are going to be there to say, even Will Fuller, who's hurt every game. We like, Will Fuller. We like Kenny Galladay. Look at these names, Brian. Who would you want on this roster? And he's like, you know what? Let's spend a little bit extra money. Let's move some things around and let's make it happen to go get Kenny Galladay. I don't know. That's kind of where I'm leaving the offense.
I already have the interns taking note that when we sign Kenny Galladay, they already have this clip cut up so that we can tweet it out right away. So don't worry, Kevin. We're already ready for that.
Appreciate it.
Ryan, really appreciate you being with us. It's been over an hour, so I know I have dinner to go eat. But why don't you just tell everyone, remind them of the piece that you said you were working on, where they can find your work and all that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be called Being Beane, turning the Bills into a Super Bowl champion. And I kind of go position by position, talk about what I think they should do. Spoiler, I don't really have them doing much to the running back room. I know that's going to upset some people. But just based on the offense alone, that'll be coming out here pretty soon, possibly over the weekend. You can find all my work at NewYorkUpstate.com, Syracuse.com, and then you can follow Matt Perino on my podcast, Shout, Buffalo Football Podcast, on all your major podcast platforms.
Yeah, and I tune into that a lot, and we love you guys. One of you seems to always be on once every couple of weeks, so we do appreciate that a lot. And if you're not going to add a running back, though, to your piece, you're saying it's a throwing team. I want to see those ideas for receiver, too, then. I want to see those ideas.
Fair enough. It'll be there, I promise.
Well, thank goodness. We're going to have some sexy wide receiver eye candy to talk about when Ryan puts that piece out. But until then, until next week when the Crowdisters podcast returns, as always, presented by Trainwreck Sports, sponsored by Manscaped. Promo code Trainwreck, 20% off, free shipping. Lawnmower 3.0. They have the funniest name stuff. When you see ball on like 5 of the different things that you use on a daily basis, it's so funny. It's just you're gonna go into your bathroom. You're gonna open the cabinet. You're just gonna laugh. Makes everything feel good. Makes you feel good. Use our promo code Trainwreck, 20% off, free shipping. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Ryan. We'll see you next week.